Growing up in a small town in Wisconsin, my dream was to become a dairy farmer. Nothing seemed more noble than becoming that person that produced that tall glass of milk I had 3 times a day. Something I don't get to enjoy anymore due to an unfortunate intolerance. I used to ride my bike to the nearby farm, sit behind the barbed fence, and just watch the cows graze. Eventually, I started to help out, milking, caretaking, sometimes even missing the first bell at school. I'll never forget telling my elementary teacher I was late because I was sticking my whole arm into the cervix of a cow, feeling for the legs that were nearly ready to come out. Bet I didn't say the word cervix. I was a shy kid, but I was always listening and absorbing. I loved hearing the owners chat about their successes, struggles, or strategies, or the farm hands complain about wages or the rising cost of milk. Whether it was the unpredictability of production, quarantining a sick cow from the rest of the herd, or the closure of a nearby farm due to economic hardships. These were the moments when I first became aware our food system isn't as simple as milk cow, sell milk, drink milk. It's more than the price tag we see at the store, or even the food we see on our plate. It's a web of underlying factors, decisions, and incentives that have led certain foods to become cheaper and more accessible than others. This was the start of my journey to uncover the unseen parts of our food system, so much so that I've dedicated my career to it. From improving food accessibility for underserved communities in Pittsburgh, to creating new revenue streams for small farms in Vermont, to today, helping to scale an impact technology company nationwide that works with grocery stores on reducing food waste and protecting the value of food. Now, my goal isn't to stand up here and tell you we need to radically reshape our food system. It's not that simple, and frankly, it's unrealistic. My goal is to bring to light how we got here, how we went from small, decentralized farms serving individual communities to the massive global ecosystem we know today, where we can access wide varieties of food from thousands of miles away. And what are the trade-offs and consequences? Who is that system not serving? What are the hidden costs of cheap food? Let's start by jumping back to the mid-1900s. World War II has come to the end, and we're seeing a rapid increase in population. Sounds like we have some boomers in the crowd. Housing developments in the suburbs are popping up, and the demand for food is on the rise. Cheap, high-calorie, shelf-stable food was a must to support this growth. This societal need also led to the development of supermarkets, fast food chains, and ultra-processed foods. And it meant the government needed to create incentives to prioritize the production of corn, wheat, soy, and rice, the building blocks for so many processed foods. Simultaneously, these foods started to come with more packaging and branding that really changed the game of food marketing. It opened the door for businesses to influence what and how people buy food. As you walked up and down the grocery aisle and took a closer look at this captivating packaging, you also started to see dates on them, but not for the reasons you may think. These were put on packaging to market freshness, not safety. You know, people loved and still love digging through to find that freshest buy, best buy, or sell-by date, landing far enough out that you must be making a good purchase. This quickly became common practice for the industry and for products to set themselves apart from the competition. While so many aspects of our food system, are really, when we think about it, when we look at the cheap food, is really hard to grasp. And so when we think about these processed foods, it's actually a lot of underlying costs. Essentially, for every $1 we spend at the store, another $2 is spent on environmental and public health damages. Collectively, we spend about $1 trillion a year on food. Fast math, that means we rack up another $2 trillion on expenses you don't see on that price tag. This includes personal health care costs to treat diet-related diseases, environmental costs from greenhouse gas emissions and land degradation, and the cost for 10% of Americans to live food insecure. These externalities are absorbed by us as consumers and our planet, but aren't necessarily front of mind when we're shopping at the store. If we were to see the total cost on the price tag, the cheap processed foods probably wouldn't look so cheap anymore. This evolved expectation for abundance, ultimate freshness, quantity, and variety has also created for a complex supply chain to manage and predict. As a result, we currently waste almost 40% of the food that is produced. 40%. Most of this being the highly perishable, shelf-stable foods doing their best to live in a processed world. And most of this waste actually happening at the end of the supply chain when it's worth the most, at the grocery store and at our homes. Think about that. For every 10 strawberries produced, 4 are never eaten. I want to break this down a bit further since this is where I spend a lot of my time today. This food represents hours of labor, acres of land, liters of water, and gallons of diesel going into growing, harvesting, and transporting food that is never even eaten. After all of that, it gets thrown in the trash and is the largest contributor to our landfills, more than paper, plastic, metal, or glass. And we all know food rots and breaks down, and as a result, releases harmful greenhouse gases, making our landfills the third largest emitter of methane, just behind fossil fuels and animal feed operations. Now, I think for most of us in the room, we don't really feel the effects of food waste on a daily basis. When we go to the store, there's still ample amounts of produce available. I can go through and touch and squeeze 20 different avocados before finding that perfectly ripe one. I know you all do it. Temperatures are rising due to climate change. How can we focus on that with our busy lives? Our wallets are getting a little lighter, but not enough to question why other than inflation. And our trash gets picked up each week and is quickly out of sight, out of mind. However, on the flip side, almost 40 million Americans are actively living food insecure and struggling to buy healthy, nutritious food every day. The government programs provide reliable access to the processed, shelf-stable food, but the beneficial calories are harder to come by. And these are the ones we waste the most. At the end of the day, there's enough food in our system, it's just about reshaping how we value it to support everyone. So, what can we do with this information? While so many aspects of our food system are out of our control as consumers, having a better understanding for these hidden costs and reframing how we value food on an individual level can have a collective impact. I think for many of us, it's overwhelming the way such complex problems are presented in the news. Whether it's climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, or even food waste, it's really hard to conceptualize. But if we break it down, there are a number of simple, practical ways that we can make changes in our daily lives. So I want to take you through some of the ways that I've updated how I shop for and consume food. The first is I've reduced my consumption of red meat and ultra-processed food. I'm definitely not immune to the luring effect of good branding or artificial flavors. But by understanding these hidden costs, I can curb some of those impulses. For example, beef has about 50 times the carbon footprint of most vegetables and 10 times that of fish. The second is I loosen my reliance on date labels to tell me when something is expired. As I mentioned earlier, these are usually coded for optimal freshness, not safety. While they're a good indicator, I also rely on color, texture, and the good old sniff test to tell me when something is still good to eat, thus throwing out less and being more amenable to buying imperfect products from the store. The third is I try to plan out my meals. Admittedly, I'm not great at this, but I'm continuing to work at it. We all know the better we plan, the further our dollar goes, and the less we throw out each week. The average American wastes about a pound of food every day. That's the weight of 3 apples every day. Collectively, that's enough food to feed 74 million people every year. And remember, there's 40 million people food insecure. And the fourth is I buy local when I can. These items usually come with a higher face value price tag, but a much lower total cost when I consider all other factors. It's also an active vote for the diversification of farming and the incorporation of local into our larger food system. And it allows me to reconnect with the people who are growing and raising our food. So, there's a lot of information here. Let's take a little time to digest it. Better than a tall glass of milk. And think about how we make our food choices. What will that look like for generations to come? It's hard to say what will change, but we know things will, just as they did from the 1950s to today. But with more transparency and a better understanding for these total costs, we can ensure our individual decisions are continually pointed in the right direction. Over time, we'll reshape the system to support all. Our reliance on harmful animal feed operations producing fast meat will go down. The demand for ultra-processed foods and monoculture farming will change. And our landfills will be less full of rotting food and far less harmful to our planet. Thank you.